Howdy. It's your two favorite guys from Bouncing Around, here to talk basketball with you. I'm in a new spot. The internet's better. We've massaged out most of the problems of the past. Also, Poe pays for half of the new studio, so he said he wanted more screen time. We've made accommodations for that, so he's in on it as well. You also have a producer tag at the end. So we're here to talk mostly the second round, sparingly about the first round, and hopefully give you some insights that you can't find anywhere else. And we will remain basically the only podcast that runs through film once a week and in great detail. Myself, Samson Folk, over there, Evin Gualberto, and listener, viewer. I hope you're ready, truly, to bounce around.
This week on Bouncing Around, your hosts, Evin Gualberto, Samson Folk, special guest, Poe, and your musical guest, Olivia.
Evin, my dear friend, my very close pal, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. The first round was hectic. The second round is proving to be less engaging than people believed. Certainly less engaging than I thought or would have wanted, but I'm hanging in. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. I thought James Harden was going to be a big part of the problem for the Bucks. I thought that the Nets were going to steamroll the Bucks. That was kind of my feeling. That's not on wax anywhere, I don't think, except me saying repeatedly to a bunch of different people that I thought the Nets are going to win the title and that I couldn't be moved off of that stance. I thought they were going to steamroll the Bucks with James Harden. I did waffle, and I don't have this written or said anywhere, but I did waffle after James Harden got hurt. I wondered what that series might start to look like. And as it turns out, and we'll get into greater detail than just right now, not as interesting as one would have thought, because of some significant failures on the behalf of the Bucks, both in personnel, how it's been organized, and how that personnel is performing on their own merits, and then the Nets as a whole, as a team, in the middle of the second round, sustaining a 50-40-90 split. That is unheard of, that is insanity, and this team is something hitherto undreamt of. We just finished the Warriors, and KD has come together to form some sort of other beautiful basketball nirvana situation. It's been fantastic. But, okay, I'm assuming that's what you were disappointed with. Okay, so after much thought, we're going to be releasing Philly versus Atlanta and Clips versus Jazz as a second episode. So 2 episodes this week. So, hell yeah. I hope you enjoy it. Evin, Clips, Mavs, Game 7. We'll start there. What were your initial takeaways?
Ooh, boy. LUKA versus the Clippers. So this is manual, pulling the numbers. I didn't look into, I'm sure there is a more efficient place to have done this, but I just did the math myself. So I didn't X out garbage time or anything like that. LUKA. You go to Basketball Reference, you'll see a billion nicknames. He deserves them all. I mean, all the good ones anyway. But LUKA scored 46 points. Everybody knows that. Assisted on 3 threes and 11 twos. I didn't do the math on and ones. I don't think there were any. The Mavs scored 111 points. LUKA generated 77 of those points. I'll let you talk about Paul George in greater depth. But Kawhi and PG, 50 points scored, 42 points assisted to other Clippers. So I excluded counting the assists for each other. I think Paul George had 3 assists to Kawhi, and Kawhi had 2 to Paul George, or one of those 2. Clippers scored 126 points. Kawhi and PG accounted for 92 of those. Those numbers blow my mind. Luka's 22 years old, I think. That's his second playoff run. He was probably one of the winningest players, certainly the youngest winningest player to come to the NBA and be under the spotlight and all of that. He just needed just a little bit more help. Just a little bit more help. And we can talk about who that should have been, but it doesn't matter now because the Mavs are out. But Luka did his best.
So an interesting little tidbit. You said he was responsible for generating 77 points?
Yes.
Okay. So not only his number, which is interesting, but to be exceptionally egocentric about this, my highest generated points in high school was 78. So, okay, all that aside, I thought it was really interesting, the duel of those two. Porzingis is the hot button topic of Dallas's offseason, what that looks like going forward. Porzingis is a much better player than he portrayed in that series. He's had elongated stretches of success. And I will say this, it's important to acknowledge this when talking about Porzingis. There is a credible rape allegation against him. Put that to the side. He struggled immensely. He had 20-9 this season. He is an above average defender. Typically, all that went out of whack. Porzingis is the player. What did you think of him in that series? What was his place?
The context of it is extremely strange because if you look at it from just a number standpoint, like moving aside the fact that he is paid what he is paid, that doesn't figure into my metric. The numbers that you talked about during the regular season, I understand that they may not carry over clean to the playoffs because the playoffs largely matchup driven. But he certainly got opportunities. It's not as if Carlisle said, we're going to hijack the offense, we're going to throw him the ball, we're going to force feed him. Although it did seem like that should have been the answer from time to time. We've talked about Porzingis quite a bit. I talked about this when it was a week of superstars was the title of the Bouncing Around episode. If you want to go look for it, a link below. He had trouble posting up against Damian Lillard. And that's not necessarily to say like he should get in the post and be able to do his work against just anybody. And Marcus Morris, Ivica Zubac, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, certainly no pushovers. But when Luka is doing the type of heavy lifting that he's doing, this is not a new take. But when he's doing what he's doing, he needs a little bit. And Jalen Brunson is a capable playmaker. Tim Hardaway Jr. is capable, so on and so forth. Dorian Finney-Smith, he arguably Luka's co-star in Game 7. You can't rely on them to be able to affect the game in the way that Porzingis should be able to. He should be a rim deterrent. He should be a spacing threat. He should, in a pinch, be a post-up threat, or at least an offensive hub when Luka is out. But I don't believe he was any of those things at the level of consistency that the Mavs would have needed. So if you're going to talk about being a co-star, you have to have a moment to shine. Game 2, probably his best moment, 20 points, 2 blocks, just the numbers. 8 of 12, his certainly most efficient game, but I just don't think he was there in the way that the Mavs needed him to be. I can't speculate as to like what the changes should have been because like my brain doesn't operate anywhere near the level of an NBA coach, 1, 2, Rick Carlisle, who is, for my money, just at the top of the tops there. So I don't know how to assess Porzingis' situation. The person I do want to talk about, though, is Maxi Klebber. I think a healthier Klebber, shout out Fish with Gun, I think he would have made a huge difference in the series if fully healthy, in Game 7, I think he played under 10 minutes. And some of it is Kawhi missing shots, but I think he was the best bet to defend Kawhi. He's not the Kawhi stopper, but if you can contain Kawhi and make him work for his 20, 30, whatever points, that's all you can ask. But the fact that Josh Richardson, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dorian Finney-Smith, like, the fact that you are relying on those guys, it gets a little harder. It gets that much harder. So, don't really have much to say about Porzingis, but I do wish a healthy Kleba would have made an appearance in the series.
Yeah, Kleba is a good point. He had success last year as well. And we talked about that in the middle of the season. That's why we talked about Fish with Gun, was that matchup. And that Kleba is a much better defensive presence than he's given credit for. That much better than Dorian Finney-Smith? Perhaps not. But one of the biggest things in the playoffs is that something teams have moved away from is matching minutes. And they like, and I think stars have recognized this as effective as well, is throwing different looks, even if that's just in the one primary. Being able to switch on and off with an effective Kleba, a healthy Kleba, and the current version of Finney-Smith that you have right now, that would have been probably more effective than oscillating between THJ and Dorian Finney-Smith, for example. And Kleba, he's one of those guys who you expect, perhaps, since he is so matchup proof, I think, when he's healthy, he's such an adaptable and important player. He's one of the guys you expect to go from like 24 minutes in the regular season to 28 minutes a game in the playoffs. You expect him to get a bump. So the fact that they couldn't do that, they couldn't stretch him out, that was a big problem for Dallas. As far as Kristaps, the biggest thing I think is that if there's a guy rotating over, let's say it's Reggie Jackson is rotating over, and Kristaps Porzingis has a lane to the rim, but he's starting at the three-point line, Reggie Jackson can stop Kristaps Porzingis. That's the biggest problem. And depending on when he gets the ball in the shot clock, it doesn't really matter. But Porzingis doesn't have the craft or balance to get around Reggie Jackson, even with those big steps. And he doesn't have the patience or tool set to get into a post-up and make him pay for being small. Then, if he does get into the post-up, let's say, he sees the small guy, doesn't want to get a charge, they're going to double, and he doesn't have the passing chops to make them pay out of that. So it's just that too often the ball ended up in Porzingis' hands, and you just have to hope that, A, he shoots it well over the course of the game to win the game, over the course of the series to win the series. You have to hope that happens, or you have to hope that the defense doesn't put him in a situation where he has to counter. And in game 2, he was getting the ball one dribble dunk, one dribble layup. That was the key. He's not in those spots enough in their offense. Is that how they're using him? To some degree, yes. But also, I like Dwight Powell on the roll way better than I like Kristaps Porzingis on the roll. So I understand why they use him to space. He's a good defender. He's maybe not as good as he should be given his, ludicrous length and size. But yeah, you take away the money, and he's still more of a plus than most players would be. But then you keep in mind, as far as team building, Porzingis' salary will infringe upon the Mavericks' ability to build around Luka going forward. That's a factor. On the court, in that playoff series, the money doesn't matter, but going into the offseason, it does. And that's something I expect they address, whether it's supplementary guys who do similar things that they would have wanted from Porzingis, or if it's moving off of him. I don't think they will. They would be selling 50 cents on the dollar or whatever that looks like. So I don't expect the team to come in super hot and heavy like we need to trade for Kristaps. Finally, we can get him. He's undervalued, because I think he's been undervalued probably in the trade market for a long time now. So, and you don't need much to play next to Luka. There are only a few things you really have to hit on. That's why Finney-Smith and Kleba have really, they're like, especially Finney-Smith has been just sublime next to Luka, and Tim Hardaway Jr. Brunson, I expect, will be signing team-friendly contracts next to Luka for quite some time. So those are all considerations. But yeah, Porzingis, obviously, he didn't meet the expectations that he was supposed to. And so that was a big problem for the Mavericks. For the Clippers, I wanted to look at, Paul George's playmaking because Kawhi Leonard wasn't playmaking a ton. He was more, the hammer of it all. The Mavericks played zone. I was a bit miffed that sometimes the Clippers weren't using Kawhi as the guy to penetrate the middle of the zone. Like, basically, they were running pretty fundamental offense against the zone. They wanted the guy to flash middle, movement off of that, see who moves up to contest the shot, where's the breakdown coming from there, make the pass if it's one pass away, if the defense plays it poorly. Kawhi can do that very well. A lot of times they opted for Marcus Morris, and maybe that's just to give Kawhi a rest, but I thought it happened quite a bit. Now, I'm not saying that the fix was to get more Kawhi because, coaches decide things for a reason, but I was impressed somewhat with Paul George and his playmaking because he is incredibly talented, especially at, pull-up shooting, and he is very comfortable not getting all the way to the bucket. And getting downhill is basically a prerequisite from playmaking. There's like Trae Young, he can play make really well from above the break because of course he can, but he's also at his most dangerous when the defense is collapsing and he can kind of diagnose where it's coming from, where are the weak points. Paul George, a lot of his assists were just one pass away, and they will be so long as he's not getting downhill as often as he should. And I really like Paul George. I think he's a wonderful player, but he did get downhill enough in Game 7. I think there are 4 assists where he got downhill, drew 2 defenders, and the ball went out the other side, more than just a pass away. So I think that's really important for them going forward, especially against the Jazz. If you can draw 2 and you don't have to go right at Rudy, that's important. But also don't let Rudy stop you from getting all the way there because Paul George is much better at getting to the rim than I think even he notices. So I enjoyed the playmaking, although it wasn't as impressive as the stats might have said in that Game 7, the 10 assists. It's big, but a lot of it was just those one passes away against the zone where the Mavericks are not like a vaunted defensive team. And I think Paul George, he played well. I enjoyed that, but it was a little, it wasn't as good as I might have thought.
It's not necessarily fool's gold, but like you were saying, it's when you see that number in the box score and you think about what the fully actualized version of Paul George is, that's a number that maybe not 10, but a number he's getting to consistently. So you want to think, or we want to think as Paul George optimists, that he'll draw, he'll manipulate, and then make the play. He did, but it's much simpler than we as Paul George optimists want. So there is that. The other thing is, when Marcus Morris and Reggie Jackson and Nick Batum and Terrence Mann and Luke Kennard all hit double digits for you. 7 players hit double digits for the Clippers. 5 players hit double digits for the Mavs. And, again, you don't need that much when Luka is generating 77 points. But you need a little more. And, so I talked about this in the preview pod. There's no need to drag myself through this. But I'm going to do it. For the sake of honesty, transparency, Josh Richardson was the person I thought would be the answer. Josh Richardson, Seth Curry swap. I thought, well, Luka is going to be able to generate a high-level offense no matter who is on the floor. To that point, I was proven correct. But, again, not a new take. What I thought would be the difference is Josh Richardson in a secondary playmaking role or a third side playmaking role, being able to attack, slither, just be able to drop the ball off after shifting the defense, et cetera, would prove as much or more value than Seth Curry. And I was wrong. I would really love to see Josh get better and plow through whatever is going on. But at a certain point, you are who you are as a player. And I'm not saying he won't get better. I'm just saying he wasn't what the Mavs needed. And he wasn't what I imagined the Mavs were expecting to get. And so, again, if Reggie Jackson is going to go off for you and Luke Kennard is going to be the attrition player who comes in and it's just like everyone is worn down, he's going to be the difference. You kind of hope that a player of Josh Richardson's level would be able to come in and make an impact in a game where everything is in the balance. But he wasn't, and, it is what it is. Terrible analysis, but...
No, that's a really good point, is that when he was with Miami and maybe the types of the context that he was playmaking and scoring out of was a little bit more, there's more structure to it. As we see, there's Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, guys who maybe would struggle in other contexts, were able to play make out of some sets, to score out of some sets with the Heat. And, sometimes you can't recreate that in other places. Josh Richardson hasn't had that success in Philly or in Dallas. And Seth Curry, he's doing his thing on the other side. I thought it was a win-win trade at the time. I think we both thought it was. And it appears that it was just a normal win trade for the 76ers. But to move us along out of this, and we'll get into the round 2 stuff, if you want to hear us talk about Kawhi and Luka, there'll be an awards thing at the end of the season, probably after the championship thing is announced. We'll talk about the season. We'll talk about Game 7 and these performances from Kawhi and Luka. Basically, because there's not a lot of strategy to it, it's just insane shot making, the wonderful playmaking bent of Luka, and the insatiable drive for the ball that Kawhi always has in these do-or-die games where he's getting these incredible offensive rebounds, putting them back up, some, godly steals on the other end, and just he keeps finding the ball. And Luka, it was just absurd shot making. It's unbelievable. But, okay, round 2. Where do you want to start?
Bucks Nets.
Okay, let's do Bucks Nets. Okay, so we're doing Bucks Nets. We talked about this a little bit at the top. Underwhelming so far. And underwhelming, I'm gonna try and tease things out of your brain. So I'm gonna ask you some direct questions. Evin, when you watch a Kyrie and Blake Griffin pick and roll, what are you trying to stop first and foremost?
What are you willing to live with? It's so silly at this point. I've said it so much. Kyrie, 50, 40, and 90 on the year. So his three-point shooting is fantastic. I could try and find the numbers in a scramble of his pull-up shooting numbers. Honestly, there's no need because it's not as if these minor adjustments are the difference in the game. These are 2 blowouts. Could it be Blake Griffin feeding off of the Brooklyn crowd and enjoying the situation and relishing that he's back and this is his moment? Yeah, perhaps. We'll have to see how he plays on the road. But Blake Griffin on the short roll is a capable passer. Kyrie Irving...
Oh, more than capable,
Yeah. Yes, that's fair. But my point was to say that you don't want Blake getting to the rim, which is why you drop against him. As a pick and pop threat, he's made his threes, so maybe you adjust a little bit to chase him off the line, but don't sell out chasing him off the line and now he has an angle at the rim. Make it so that he has to take those contested twos, which is the whole point of drop. So I know it's difficult when you're playing Bobby Portis and Brook Lopez or even Giannis on him and they're dropping and he's popping out because that's the perfect counter to it. But you have to find a way to take the ball out of Kyrie's hands and put the ball in Blake's in a position where he is at the elbow or maybe hopefully even further out, but not behind the 3-point line. Make him make plays in that situation especially, and when I say make plays, I mean ask him to take tough shots. Incentivize that stuff. And then you can start to chip away a little bit at these huge margins.
And if you're Jrue Holiday, make sure to rotate to the rim if you're the low man, rather than just giving up dunks. He had a few defensive gaffes that I was kind of surprised to see from him. And like, that's the thing about looking at defense through the lens of like film. If you're not in the room with the players, you don't know who really messed up. Like when it was that DJ Augustine's winning shot against the Raptors game 1, when he hit that pull-up 3 after both Kawhi and Gasol dropped out of it, because Kawhi probably thought, well, it's the late game, we're just going to switch it. And Mark was saying, we play drop. I'm dropping. And it's DJ Augustine, who had a good game. I think he had like 24. But you wonder who was at fault there. If something was said in the huddle, because Kawhi seemed to think you're going to switch. You know, Marc Gasol thought drop. They've both won Defensive Player of the Year. Like, who's at fault, really, right? And you don't know what was said in the huddle. They obviously addressed that in a practice. There's no way they didn't, or addressed it right after the game in the locker room. No way they didn't. And then so you look at, like, when guys mess up rotations, you wonder, because you see guys point, and maybe they're pointing a guy to get into a spot, or maybe they're yelling mine and, like, pointing to the spot. And you never really know. You can only guess. And by watching some of the tape, I would guess that Jrue made more defensive gaffes than I would have expected. And that's a big deal, because when Jrue is primary on, you know, Kyrie, who's involved in a lot of these actions, even more so with James Harden out, that you pay a lot for. And same with Brook Lopez, who help side defense is a little bit toothless. You spoke about don't sell out to Blake Griffin, and Brook Lopez has been playing the middle ground a little bit too strongly sometimes, to the point where he hasn't been able to help. And he's also put himself in a position where he wouldn't be able to have a very effective contest running out at Blake Griffin, and certainly would fall victim to a pump fake and a drive. And then it's a 4-on-3 with Blake, who, while it's better to have him moving downhill than it is Kyrie or KD, or even, you know, Bruce Brown to some degree, it's still Blake Griffin, who's, you know, not a generational passer for his position, but very talented. And so I was confused at a lot of the ways that these guys are playing defense, decisions they're making on the fly, routes they're taking, angles they're giving up. And, you know, this was something you saw with Giannis as well. But it's also kind of, and I'll let you kind of wax poetic about how they're organizing the offense from the Brooklyn Nets side, and how basically it's really big about how Joe Harris fits in. So let's move more so into how the Nets are doing things really well to just put the Bucks in a bind. And I'll let you take the lead on that. So
let's start with this. Per cleaning the glass, Joe Harris, 48% on threes. He's in the 99th percentile per cleaning the glass for wings. 210 of 441 threes. That's insane. So we'll use that to build the context for everything here. Let's jump to game 1. This is the very beginning of the second quarter. Kyrie has the ball at midcourt. Giannis is on him, and he was on him quite a bit. Giannis on smalls, something I maybe want to address later, not necessarily something that needs any more pointing out. It's just so the matchups: Joe Harris, Chris Middleton, Blake, Bobby Portis, Brook, Claxton, Mike James, Jeff Teague. Okay? Blake sets a wide pin for Joe coming off. Joe quickly flips it back. Now, Khris and Giannis switch here. Rather soft switch, but I understand why you can't leave Joe Harris and why you can't leave Kyrie Irving. Too dangerous. So now Kyrie has Khris on an island. Bobby Portis is on Blake, one pass away. Kyrie gets caught up in the air, swings it to Blake. Blake swings it back. It's a 5-out. He is going to straight line drive because he knows he can get past Khris Middleton. No disrespect to Khris. He knows he can get past him. Claxton is in the dunker. Mike James is hard to say exactly where he is, but let's say he's in between the corner and free throw line extended. Joe is at a 45. Remember, Giannis is switched on to Joe here. What's going to happen is Kyrie is going to straight line drive. Claxton is going to shoot in from the dunker, waiting for that drop off. Teague has to bump. Now, you have Kyrie with a straight pass to Mike James here. Joe Harris is important here because Joe is lifting further. He was at the 45 and now he's lifting to the top of the key, which puts Giannis in an impossibly tough position. Brook has to help. Otherwise, Kyrie is at the rim. So Kyrie gets up in the air. He passes to Mike James, who has taken one step down, again, in between free throw line extended and the corner, but closer to the corner now. Giannis has to rotate over. He has to. But Mike James very quickly makes the decision, swing. To Joe Harris, who is now out of frame at the top of the key, at the very top, making it a longer closeout than it would have been. Jeff Teague has to get all the way over. Joe Harris doesn't care about Jeff Teague's contest. He shoots, he makes it, obviously. So that's game one. How did they do it? A very simple, there's nothing to it other than Blake set that pin and then Joe flipped it back. And then they switched, Khris and Giannis. Did they need to? Again, I said, I understand why they did. But in those situations, those can be helped. Now, I tweeted about this one. There are more examples of this that we can get into, but here's the thing. The Nets play with court geometry in a way that Mike D'Antoni teams do. Steve Nash, when he was a player, that's what he did. Manipulation. So Joe Harris is in the left corner, or not exactly in the corner, but Joe Harris has Pat Connaughton on him. Giannis is on Blake. This is game two. Jrue Holiday is on the ball. The ball is in Mike James's hands. Bruce Brown matched up on Brook Lopez. Landry Shamet in the strong side corner. Bryn Forbes is on him. You can't help off of these shooters one pass away. We talked about this with the PG thing. It's too easy a pass. We talk about this at the high school level. You don't suck in on those. Players are too good. And this is the NBA now. So you're not leaving Landry Shamet. Mike James is going to dribble at. He gets a simple brush screen from Bruce Brown, but that really doesn't do anything. He swings it to Blake. Blake pitches it to Joe Harris. Connaughton and Giannis have to switch. Joe swings it back to Mike James at the top of the key. Bruce Brown is now coming to set a screen. Joe takes it and goes from the top of the key and then loops all the way around back to the weak side. Here's what's happened now. Giannis is on Joe. You can't leave. Brook is in drop. Bruce sets the screen. Mike James is attacking. He has Jrue on his hip. Freeze. Giannis is the weak side eye. If you don't know what that means, it's two players back there. Blake is at the 45 with Pat Connaughton on him. Giannis has Joe Harris. Joe Harris is very wisely not in the corner. He's lifting up. Giannis is the low man in this situation. Brook is in drop, like I said. You can't help off the strong side corner. Jrue is in jail. Mike James attacks, flips the ball up, high. Brook Lopez contests. Great contest by Brook. But the problem here is that Joe has continued to lift, and Blake is coming further out. By the time the shot is up, there's nobody on Bruce. It's an easy putback. And the problem with that is it's not that Milwaukee messed that up. It's really not. Could one of them have... So here's the thing in the weak side eye. Normally the low man will help, and then the high man in the eye has to shore up those two, zone up. If Giannis comes over, Mike James can make that pass. He's proven the ability to make that off the dribble skip. Joe Harris is getting the ball. That's the worst thing that can happen on the floor with this lineup. If Pat comes up or tags Brown, then now you're leaving Blake on a 45, and then Giannis is going to have to suck in anyway. Or, worst case, Blake starts to suck in, starts to cut 45, Mike swings him the ball, and then he swings it to Joe. but Giannis is going to have to guard 2 and close out to 2. That's tough. And it's just little stuff like this where the Nets are either putting Joe in a situation where he is the screener or one pass away, or just straight up using him as like the dribble handoff / attack option. So another example is game 2, like this is the first now. Joe Harris is going to inbound the ball to Bruce Brown. He has Khris Middleton on him. KD is in the short corner with PJ Tucker on him. Joe is going to screen for KD. It's Chicago action, basically. So Bruce has the ball. He's going to pitch it to KD. But now PJ is a step behind because he's not coming off of KD's body, which we can talk about that. The question of Khris matching up with KD in a little bit. But PJ is chasing through. Now he has to fight through a dribble handoff with Bruce Brown. Brook is in drop, obviously. It's Chris's job to help because he's in the strong... Actually, I don't really know. But Khris could help here. He doesn't because Joe Harris is on him. And that leaves KD enough room to step over or, do that windmill rip thing and then drop the ball off. And then Brown is able to get a layup. Joe Harris is bending the defense in a way that I guess is breaking Budenholzer's brain. It's breaking everybody's brain, really. Because like I said, it's not necessarily the Bucks' fault, but the Nets do this thing where you have no choice. Kyrie's very good at this. You'll see this, if you go back and watch game 2, you will see this a few times. Where Kyrie is bringing the ball up the court, and he's not calling a play out. He's gesturing for Joe Harris, his left hand is waving, to come up and set a screen. Bryn Forbes is on him. You can see Joe waving everybody else away. Khris Middleton is on Kyrie. What's going to happen is Joe is going to set the screen. Bryn Forbes now has to make a choice. Are they switching this? Because I love Bryn Forbes' shot making, but he cannot guard Kyrie. Are they switching this, or are they showing and recovering? How best to handle a Kyrie-Joe Harris screen and roll? So Joe stays, they show and recover, and then Joe spaces out. But the thing about that is it's still dangerous because Kyrie has the ball. So he's able to pull up tough 2 over Khris Middleton. They put you in these positions where Joe is the focal point for me of this Nets offense. Where he is on the court dictates what side they are attacking. Who switches onto him dictates how patient they will be in the offense.
And yeah, you basically nailed it with Joe. This is like basketball 101. This is a coach and a team that very clearly recognizes how to organize themselves to take advantage of things. And you sent a clip where Khris Middleton, it seemed, wanted Giannis to run up and screen, and Bobby Portis went up and screened instead. And you would think to yourself, it would be more advantageous to involve Giannis in a screening action rather than to have him, and I use this term loosely, spacing to the corner. And he's not even going to creep the baseline to get into the dunker spot or anything like that. This is just bad offense, basically, because you have to have talented players, A, but B, you have to put them in the proper positions to take advantage and leverage their talents against the defense. As Evin laid out wonderfully, this is happening all the time with the Nets. Bruce Brown, I will add in addition to that, I love when he's positioned on the weak side because he's constantly switching between sealing and screening the weak side zoner. I love that because he's making the right decision a really high percentage of the time. Not Drop Lopez. Wow, that's funny. But if Brook Lopez is catching up to the play, he's going to screen the weak side zone so that, for example, Joe Harris can float to the corner or KD can float to the corner. They can form up off of the drive coming down on the strong side for that sprayed cross-court pass, that little lob. He's going to make that screen wide open shot for a team that is 50, 40, 90. Or if the drop isn't coming or if there's not a guy coming down to tag, he's going to pop into the dunker spot and is a revolutionary as a 6'4" guy in the dunker spot. And this isn't just weak side zone that he's able to kind of attack. This is finding spots, when guys are running like gut DHOs and he's pinching off the corner for 45 cuts off the baseline, just slipping, ghosting, all that stuff. He makes incredible reads. Bruce Brown, keep doing your thing, man. But I'll do an Evin, let's say. I'll walk through some plays, and it'll just be clips over top. So in game one, I was really interested in what Kyrie was doing, what seemed to be the most effective way to play him in the screening actions. So I just wanted to watch, how the screening actions went. And drop didn't end up being the most effective. Now, in a game-to-game sample, it's tough unless you're a really, really good coach and you can see all the underlying factors of what makes something work. But sometimes it just looks like shot making, which sometimes it is. But drop wasn't the most effective in game one, and it was because of Kyrie's ability to hit from the middle of the floor. Kyrie missed quite a few shots in game one, and a lot of it seemed like he was goaded into pull-up threes. This is anecdotal. I haven't looked it up, but it seems to me that Kyrie is more potent pulling up out of isolation and in transition than he is out of the pick and roll. And so if you can get pull-up threes where there's a hedge and a recovering Jrue, let's say Jrue is recovering to contest, that seems like possibly a win for the Bucks defense. If you can have Kyrie pulling up from three instead of getting downhill. Because as Evin laid out, one pass away is bad above the break. But a lot of players can make that, and it's not going to break your defense. It's only going to break your defense if they're shot making. You can get away with leaving some guys open one pass away above the break with some teams and how they're constructed. One pass away when a guy is going downhill, that's just murder. That's death. One pass away going downhill is way different. So trying to keep Kyrie away from that works pretty well, especially since Kyrie has become a much better passer than I think he gets credit for at this point in time. Now, if Kyrie, there was one where Bryn Forbes hedged and Kyrie just called the bluff. He's like, you're going to try and recover, so I'm going to drive right at you. And he did try to recover, and he just went straight to the basket. But it was interesting because they ran a lot of different screening partners. So Kyrie with Griffin, Kyrie with Joe Harris, Kyrie with Shamet, Kyrie with Claxton, and Kyrie with Mike James. Basically, they're like, put Kyrie in screening action, see what happens, let him attack the weaknesses. And he's scoring on a lot of these. And it just depends on how you want to play it. And they played a lot of different, like with Jrue and Khris, they switched and Kyrie hit a pull-up three over Khris Middleton. But it was after a point of rest. They went with Griffin, Jrue chased over top, Brook was dropping, Kyrie made the floater. So with Shamet, Jrue and Forbes, they do the hedge and recover. Kyrie abuses the hedge, as I talked about earlier, and he finishes over rotating Lopez. Maybe the rotation is a step late, but also if Kyrie's coming downhill, how do you avoid that really? And then with Claxton, it was Giannis on Kyrie, and Giannis just hugged the screen, and basically it wasn't sideline, so I wouldn't call it icing, but they funneled Kyrie down to the baseline, and Kyrie tried to cut it back middle, and Lopez was enough of a presence that Kyrie had to go to kind of a funky shot selection, and Giannis trailing swatted him from behind. And they were allowed to be that aggressive because of the route. By snaking middle again, he kind of took away his passing angle to Claxton, and Claxton isn't the most viable candidate among the guys who are mentioned to make Kyrie really dangerous. And so effectively, I guess Giannis and Lopez were kind of able to double him in the middle of the floor. Both of them were able to contest. Giannis ended up getting the block. So they give a lot of different looks, and obviously Griffin hit some pick and pops in this game, and that was nice to see. But okay, as far as some assists that came out of this, there's a stagger with KD on ball. Harris sets the initial screen, and Kyrie ghosts the second one with Jrue cheating over to the sideline. And KD makes a great pass to Irving, who's now shooting into the middle, and the defense collapses, comes up, obviously, and Griffin, who is spacing out the weak side, he comes in from the baseline, and he just gets it off to him for a layup. Jrue had recovered all the way back, which he was supposed to do to make up for it, but when it was Griffin on Jrue in the paint, it was just like, who's going to win that? Griffin went up for a layup. And then basically there was another assist where Jrue goes under a Griffin screen and Lopez is in really, really deep drop. So Irving audibles into a dribble handoff with Harris, who gets a step on Jrue, who's switching with Middleton. And then this is something I tweeted out as well. You see that Lopez, and I talked about it earlier in this podcast, Lopez puts himself in no man's land. Joe Harris is able to turn the corner, and that's bad news bears. So there's Kyrie being in these actions makes everything a lot more complicated for the Bucks. And as you know, the same thing with Joe Harris making everything more complicated, breaking Bud's brain, as Evin said. It's just good basketball, just damn good basketball.
Yeah, and on the other end, I'm not saying that, nor have I ever said that Bud is a bad coach. It's just there are situations that are confusing to me. I'll talk about this one thing that I saw in game one. I understand Giannis needs a blow. I understand that. It's 9 minutes. Yeah, just barely over 9 minutes left in the second quarter of game one. Giannis comes out, and what you're left with on the floor is Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, PJ Tucker, Khris Middleton, I believe Jeff Teague. So what do the Nets do? Swing the ball to Nick Claxton because they know Brook is going to drop. He dribbles at Kevin Durant coming out of the corner. Now, PJ Tucker, you're left with a choice. You can deny this pass or play it straight up, but because Brook is in drop, KD is going to get that little bit of separation. PJ opts to try and deny the pass, so KD hard plant, goes back door, not necessarily enough to get a layup, but step, plant, Claxton is able to make a great bounce pass. KD gets a pull-up jumper on the baseline over the outstretched arms of Brook and PJ. It's Kevin Durant. That doesn't matter. So, right down the floor, who is the focal point of this offensive unit? It's Khris Middleton, probably. So, I guess the best thing to do is go post up Kyrie Irving. So, Brook is in dunker spot. PJ, far corner, Teague at the 45, Portis one pass away. Khris, if he's going to hit the shot, great. But it's still a tough shot over effectively 5 because they are walling up. This is what Miami did super, super well in the bubble. They not only walled up against Giannis, they're walling up against Khris when Giannis isn't in. I'm not questioning the rotations. I know you have to buy Giannis minutes. But if you're going to put Khris on the floor and it's going to be Claxton and KD as the only bigs on the other side, then you have to do something where you can bludgeon them on the boards. So the Bucks aren't able to convert. Mike James brings the ball down, swings it to Kyrie, and Kyrie just pulls like only Kyrie can. So that's 5 points. Bud takes a timeout. He subs Holiday in, and I believe somebody else. I had the notes. I can't find them at this moment. But he gets rid of that lineup as quickly as possible. So there's that. And this one, not necessarily on Bud, because I hate the times where the players are doing something on the court, and it could be Bud's fault. It might not be. But the default is to blame the coach because it looks like a bad set. What you talked about, the set in particular that you referred to in game one, or no, sorry, not the set that you referred to. I'll work my way to that. In game one, the Bucks ran this Spain-ish action. Khris Middleton is bringing the ball down. Giannis sets a ball screen, and Jrue sets not necessarily a back screen, but he sets a screen onto Blake, so he is at the elbow, so he is delayed a little bit as Giannis sets the ball screen for Khris. I don't know what this action is because it's not a ram, it's not a rip, but what happens is Giannis, Middleton pick and roll, empty corner, if KD rotates over, he's on the other block wrestling with Brook, then it's a simple drop-off pass to Brook. Giannis can make that. Nobody rotates over. Giannis gets a dunk. It reminded me of, we talked about the Suns versus Bucks in Milwaukee. It reminds me of definitely Spain pick and roll on that side, where it's the same personnel and Giannis is dunking over people because you have that empty side and Giannis with a live dribble downhill. There's nothing you can do about that. Another possession is like empty pick and roll with Giannis works. He has roll gravity. Our good friend Caitlin Cooper talked about this. Roll gravity. I was about to curse there. Roll gravity. What you were talking about. Jrue has the ball, top of the key. Khris is coming down. Portis on the strong side block. Giannis is walking to the corner, and Bryn Forbes is walking with him. That's fine. I'm okay with that spacing. What I'm not okay with is the fact that it seems like Khris, to your point, is urging Giannis to go set the screen. There's 15 seconds left on the shot clock. There is more than enough time for Portis to pause and sprint out of there. He can either go to the strong side corner and then loop around to the weak side corner, or he can just go to the weak side corner. There's time. There's so much time. Giannis doesn't budge. He puts his hands on his shorts and is in the corner next to Bryn Forbes. Portis sets a flat ball screen. Jrue comes off of it, or actually, he rejects it. And he's now going at KD, who's backpedaling. Hezi, pull up at the elbow. He makes it. Fine. But here's the problem with that. The problem is the process. At this point, it's 15-27 in the first of the second game, where game one you got blown out. These are little things you have to fix. Again, I don't know if I should blame Bud. Everybody wants to blame Bud. So let's, for a second, let me be the coach's advocate and say, hey, Giannis, Khris is telling you to get over there. Why don't you get over there? 3 for 11 on corner threes this year. And even if he's getting that shot off, there are literally 4 guys right there. Actually, Khris is in the dunker spot and Kyrie is underneath the basket. So there are 6 guys right there. Why on earth would you, as the reigning MVP, not want to go set that ball screen and attack all that empty space? It's so confusing to me. And, at this point, I don't know if I want to blame the coach, the coaching staff, the players, Giannis being tired, which is a possibility there. I don't know what it is, but something has to be done about it.
Do we feel like we've done Brooklyn and Milwaukee? How do we feel?
I feel bad, but mostly because I've had to watch Milwaukee. So, yeah, I think we should move on.
Ready to move on?
Or, well, I should say there are fixes here. There are fixes. But based on what's been happening, I don't know if those fixes will be enough. It would not be insane to me if you told me no Harden for the rest of the series. It would not be insane to me if you told me the Bucks came storming back, because they have the ability to do so. They just need to clean up these things. It's just that 2 losses early, it makes you think it's over. It's not. Let's not overreact. The Clippers were down 2-0 at the time we recorded the last podcast, and you went out on a limb and said, I think the Clippers are going to win this. You said Clippers in 6, but you also said that they could lose tonight and they'd be down 3-0 and I look like an idiot. So you went out on a limb and said that. I'm not saying the series is over and people should not overreact. I understand that it feels over, but the Bucks are going to have to hit on very, very, very many things in order to clean up what's been happening.
That's one of the really interesting things about the Bucks is that they showed that adaptability is far. Well, I'm not surprised that the Bucks are struggling defensively. I am surprised that they're struggling offensively. That's where I'm at with this series. And there are plenty of reasons why that's happening. There's a lack of adaptability that's been shown. but that adaptability was shown in the regular season. And from what I can tell, and I tweeted this out, Blake Griffin has brought it to the best of his ability. That ability still has a hard cap, like a hard ceiling on it. And that is not the ability that brings the end of the world to Giannis's doorstep, which it has so far. As you say, there are fixes. Now, would I pick Milwaukee to start winning these shootouts and stuff like that? No. But I would pick Milwaukee to be closer at halftime and closer at the end of games if they can start to figure out how to score against a Brooklyn Nets defense that has done a way better job vexing them than they probably should. That's my final take from the series, is that I don't think Milwaukee wins, but I think that Milwaukee probably identifies more of their offensive weak spots and does a better job of fixing them as this series goes along. Maybe there's a couple close games when the three-point shooting, the pull-up game doesn't completely run rampant. Maybe that happens, but I still don't see the Bucks winning this. I understand why people wanted to pick the Bucks because the Bucks showed so many steps in the right direction this year, adaptable, versatile basketball. I mean, Lewis, he wrote just a fantastic piece on it, especially in regards to their defense. But none of that matters against a 50, 40, 90 team. And I hate to say that because is that an indictment of basketball? No, I don't think so. I think it's just you kind of tip your cap to a team that is so good at what they do. And it's not just pull-up shooting. It is Joe Harris, Bruce Brown in the margins, greasing those wheels, baby. That might be our first shirt, by the way. Actually, our second shirt. First shirt is the Garfunkel. The second shirt is me in a ball cap with a big mustache and like a quote that says, wheel greasing. But anyway, okay, yeah. The Bucks can be better. I just don't think it's enough to beat the Nets. The Nets are good. There's a reason I've been saying for forever, like, yeah, that's the team. So, although I would love to see the Suns or the Clippers play them, we'll see. But let's move on to Suns Nuggets then, yeah? Okay. This is, I think, what a lot of people are expecting to be the best series because a lot of people I've seen just think like, yeah, the Clippers are going to handle the Jazz. It seems like Mike Conley is out. We'll be diagnosing this later in the week, I assume. Maybe it's just audio. Maybe it's video as well. I'm just trying to tease like a future Patreon release endlessly. But, okay, I'm going to get down on the floor cushion for this. Oh, okay, it's floor cushion time. So let's talk Suns and Nuggets. I'm going to swing it to you. Initial thoughts on Jokic versus, you have the MVP and probably the most well-rounded team. The Suns are able to counter in a multitude of ways, and Jokic is maybe the most unstoppable force in the league. Those two things head-to-head, what have you thought so far?
Jokic is, yeah, you said it, MVP. He's really good. He's really good. He elevates everybody else on the roster. But there's only so much he can do. You're asking him to defend at a high level, which is required for a team that has Deandre Ayton, which we talked about this in the Suns app. Man, we were both impressed. His ability to do a lot or as little as you're asking him to do is everything to this team. Ayton is making Jokic work. Much has been made of, he said that, I love playing against him. He's the MVP. And yeah, he made me work a lot, more than maybe anybody else in the West. All of that stuff. But no Murray, no Barton. You asked me what teams could do to stop the Murray-Jokic two-man game. I said nothing. You gave me my choice of personnel to stop the two-man game.
Okay. Evin stops the best players in the world. How do you stop the Jokic Porter Jr. got DHO?
You bump Michael Porter Jr. That's it. It's that simple.
Egg on my face. I thought I had you stumped.
So going forward, that probably won't work because he will adjust, as good basketball players do. But Michael Porter Jr. has... Okay. Shout out to the group chat. If you guys are watching this, Polar, this is from you. You pointed it out. I couldn't not see it. Michael Porter Jr., when bumped, is a different player. You bump him off his spot, he is shy about contact. Not necessarily shy. Maybe that's not fair. He's young. He's slight of frame, let's say. And I guess it's more of a mindset thing because I think he's stronger than he acts like. So you bump him off his spot, you make him play with and through contact, and he'll take a contested two. The problem with Michael Porter Jr. as an offensive weapon, or when you're trying to defend him, is that he's good at making tough shots. But if you make him make tough shots, they are tough shots. You live with those shots. Are you willing to lose to Jokic playing huge Steve Nash ball? Or that's not fair. Jokic is a better passer because his height, his ability to see things. That should mean the world coming from me. There's nobody I adore more. Do you live with Jokic doing Jokic things? No. And you don't have to. Make everybody else beat you. Like I said, Austin Rivers, he was good last round. Aaron Gordon, he's showing more things than he did in Orlando.
Good defense. Very good defense.
Yeah. But offensively, like, what are you going to do? Let Jokic beat you when you could force Campazzo and Morris and Jamike and Millsap and all those dudes? Make somebody else. If they're going to kill you in a game when they get hot, okay. But that is not a sustainable thing to expect from these Nuggets anyway. And the Suns just have more pieces offensively, and they have enough pieces defensively that they will come at you. That's the value of Monty Williams did not win Coach of the Year. I wonder if that may be because people are crediting Chris Paul more or whatever it is.
The 8-0 also looms large in some people's minds from the bubble. So they might think like this team was already there and then they got Chris Paul, which right. Monty was still anyway.
It's a silly conversation that we have to have, but we don't have to have that right here, right now. The Suns are it's so tough to use the word perfect, especially for me. My players, if you're watching, we've never been perfect. So anyway, the Suns force you to move nonstop when you're on defense because they're connected. They're on a string on both ends. And the way they hunt, it's so... We can jump into the clips, or I can keep talking, but it's not, no matter what, it's not going to be great for Michael Porter Jr. So which would you rather do? Jump into the clips, or we'll go back and forth first?
Can I do Ayton first? Because we were talking about Ayton. Okay, so I really wanted to understand how Ayton was scoring his baskets. Of course, I was noticing, you notice everything as much as you can on the fly when you watch the game. And it was a really good game. But especially with the Suns, is you want to see everything that's happening outside of the primary action. Because as Evin was just saying, they're going to make you busy elsewhere. They were doing a really good job of occupying everybody so that A, Ayton had a mismatch where help wasn't going to turn him into a passer, or B, a lane to the bucket. As you can see, and this is something I maybe should have talked about a little bit with the Bucks and early seals in transition and how it's more important for Brook Lopez to look to do that than it is for him to look to do that in the half court because, as you were saying, the wall that was built by the Nets. But you can see DeAndre Ayton, he seals Gordon early in transition, and he still ends up moving away from his spot, even though the help didn't come. And Gordon wasn't enough, of a mismatch for him to bully him into really deep post position, and B, Ayton is contact averse. He's been very good. He's very good, and I've been super happy with his development, but he is contact averse. He moved away. It probably ended up being like 3 or 4 feet by the end of when the ball left his hand on his hook shot. When the Suns, for example, can run a UCLA cut for Booker to come up on the other side, it basically turns into a pin down, and Jokic comes up to the level of the screen, and Ayton comes down on the roll. Book makes that pocket pass, and Rivers took just a really bad route, trailing him anyway. But Gordon is rotating, but Ayton was already so close in proximity that it's just an easy, pump fake and put the ball up for him. That's easy for him. He's deep enough already. He doesn't have to worry about going up through contact. He's very comfortable shooting from that spot. The next bucket he had was just Jokic again at the level of the screen. Beautiful pocket pass from Chris Paul. And that was where Ayton had his poster, his and one poster. And so you look at this game and how he was scoring, and it's just because Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, Cam Johnson, Cam Payne, Book, CP3, all these guys are an imminent threat always because they move intelligently, they form up off of drives. So everything that happens with Ayton, where you see he's having success and you're just seeing this massive guy in the middle of the court and there's no double. He's not feeling pressure. That isn't because the Nuggets are bad at defense. It's because the Nuggets are tending to other things that have hurt them previous or in the future of the game. They feel like we don't want to allow this. What we have to give up currently on this possession is Ayton. And Ayton, to his credit, has done a wonderful job of A, being efficient in those sets, finishing plays, even a couple mid-range jumpers, and B, garbage manning, cleaning up trash elsewhere. With the defensive steps that he's taken and how good the defense around him is to kind of, really supplement what he's doing on that end, the fact that he's just being efficient in drawn-up sets and efficient in garbage manning on offense is quite literally all the Suns could want from him. And in the future, is that early seal and transition going to either end up in, ideally, free throws or he's right under the bucket for a layup? Absolutely, and it should. He needs to get better at that. But for now, he's holding up his end of the bargain. Ayton has been sublime for the Suns, especially on offense. It's just, and they make it easy for him, true, but you still have to convert, and he's done a fantastic job of converting. I've been really happy with him.
Yeah. Of course, if you're a fan of this, chances are you are a fan of the low post. The thing that Zach Lowe talked about for the longest time with Ayton is he faces up a lot. He is a little contact averse. He has gotten a lot better at it, but he's still contact averse. If he's going to finish through contact, that's one thing. But I feel as if it's the pushing him off the block. It's the constant fight where you can sort of challenge him to keep pushing for that one spot on the floor. So a face-up is the path of least resistance. He's okay at that. Actually, I think I don't have the numbers in front of me. This series, that's a livable shot for the Nuggets. The challenge will be how far he can get, how deep he can seal, et cetera, et cetera. But he's also a huge, huge target. Unlike anybody the Nuggets can put on him outside of Jokic. Paul Millsap and JaMychal Green, solid front court pairing. I talked about them in the Nuggets episode that we did, we did back-to-back Nuggets episodes. But it doesn't matter who the 4 and the 5 is in that lineup offensively. But defensively, it kind of does. There is nobody has enough spring in them outside of maybe JaVale McGee, who I don't think we're going to see this series. In meaningful minutes, I should say. Guarding Ayton as a roles roll threat, lob threat, duck in from the dunker. Just he's going to do his damage. And, we'll look a little bit into how he does that. There's one play in particular where you can probably guess who I'm going to talk about, but there's a player who it really messes up defensive rotations, and Ayton is able to get a dunk.
Okay, so just the guy we're talking about obviously is Michael Porter Jr., who made strides. And I talked about the gut DHO. We talked about how ludicrous his shot making can be at times. He's very important for the Nuggets now and into the future. And he's made strides defensively compared to last year. But this game was just really rough for him, especially as far as defensive responsibility. It's not even that, he's in a position and he's having a tough time with it. It's just that he didn't assume the position that he was supposed to. And so I have 3 plays that come to mind. So it's the Chicago action. Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton, and Book are all involved. Ayton is currently on ball. He's going to hand off. Book is coming off the initial screen that Mikal is setting for him. And Ayton is going to rim roll after he sets the handoff. They're going to give chase on Book, and Jokic is going to try and step up to the level. They're both trailing. That leaves Michael Porter Jr. in the weak side zone. He has to tag Ayton, and then he has to accommodate for both those guys. Mikal Bridges is floating up and forming up off of the play to try and make himself available for a pass. There's 2 guys on Booker now, effectively, and the easiest pass to make, it looks like, is Mikal. That's the play that's made a lot of times. Only Michael Porter Jr., he has a very, very soft tag on Ayton, and if he would have timed it better, Booker was already leaving his feet, and that's Booker in a very bad position. Michael Porter Jr. rewards him, and credit to Booker for making this read while in air, but Booker is able to audible from making that pass above the break to Bridges into just lobbing to Ayton. And Michael Porter Jr., you can just play the middle. You didn't have to give up your leverage in that case. And, you would think that they'd be able to recover to Ayton by that time. So you just want the offense to keep moving the ball. You don't want to let them finish the play. And when he left Ayton to go jump out to Bridges for a pass that never came, you let the Suns end the play. And the Suns are really damn good at ending the play. And then the other 2 possessions are the one, it's a very, very high pick and roll, and Ayton is coming down. Jokic steps to the level of the screen. Facu is also there. And it looks like Gordon is pointing to Porter Jr. and probably saying, you are the low man. You've got the rotation. That doesn't happen. And Gordon has to rotate over. Michael Porter Jr. ends up rotating over, neither effectively, and Ayton gets a huge dunk. And then Ayton's first basket of the game for Book, he comes off. It's basically a pin down at the end. And Jokic steps to the level of the screen. Austin Rivers is trailing Booker at that point in time. Pocket pass to Ayton on the roll. And Michael Porter Jr. doesn't come over and help. Aaron Gordon has to cover, and Ayton is able to get a super easy hook shot. When you're not able to operate in the midst of the defense and you're creating breakdowns, that's really tough for the team to work around, especially against a team as clever and precise and clinical as the Suns. Because a lot of the times this is Ayton and Booker taking advantage, but there's more where it's CP3. And the thing is, Booker on ball, I don't have a problem with Booker's playmaking. I'm pretty happy with where it's at. You always want players to get better, but if someone was complaining about Booker's playmaking, I think I would take up for his side. That being said, there's a term in baseball, guessing along with the pitcher as to what they're going to do. You can still kind of do that with Booker, and there's a reason he had 5 turnovers in this game. It's Facu, it's Morris, it's Gordon playing the passing lanes off of him. You can still kind of generate offense and transition off Booker. CP3 will not give you that opportunity, and he will prey on you. And so those are cool things I noticed. I guess you're going to take us to the most important stretch of the game.
Well, just wanted to shout out, as always. Again, we're shouting her out again. Caitlin Cooper. I had this play bookmarked, but she tweeted it. It's hers now. I'm building off of greatness. Second quarter, as Caitlin pointed out, the Suns are going to run stack. That's the hands end for it. Telegraph it. Spain pick and roll. We have a whole episode on that. If you would like to learn, link below. Monty Morris is calling out stack. Dario Saric is a ball screener. Chris Paul has the ball at half court. Dario is setting the ball basically at the logo. Michael Porter Jr. has Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson is coming up to set the back screen. Paul Millsap has to, in effect, hedge, but he doesn't go out all the way. He doesn't work to bump Chris Paul off. It's crazy to me that Chris Paul and Paul Millsap are the same age, just as an aside. Paul pocket pass to Dario. Michael Porter Jr. stops the roll and the ball, which is great. But Paul Millsap is also there. Monty Morris is back on Chris Paul. I believe the coverage here was Paul Millsap drops and Porter takes the guy popping. So nobody has to rotate over. Everybody stays connected to their man. Michael Porter Jr. decides not to do that. He stops the ball, which is fine. Again, it's fine. But it's your rotation or your responsibility to communicate. Cam Johnson is popping to the three-point line. Paul Millsap has to go from the restricted area all the way out. And there is no way, credit to Paul Millsap for being able to do what he does at a high level at this age, but there's no way he's going to make that closeout. And you can see Michael Porter Jr., I think, recognize his mistake and he starts to come over. I am extremely confident that is the right read because I asked Caitlin and she told me the answer. So there's that. But if we jump to the third, like I said, that key stretch where the Suns took the lead and never looked back. Side out of bounds, 7 minutes left. Devin Booker has Aaron Gordon on him. Aaron Gordon, we're not going to talk about in great detail. Samson said this earlier. Great defense on Devin Booker. Made him work as hard as possible. But Devin Booker has become a really good manipulator with his eyes, a proactive passer, as friend of the pod Evan Zaucha says. High ball screen. Jokic comes up. Ayton sort of rolls into space. Austin Rivers and Michael Porter Jr. are on the weak side. Porter Jr. is in the lane. His guy, Mikal Bridges, is in the corner. Austin Rivers is pointing, I believe, telling him to tag. Porter does not tag because Ayton doesn't roll. So the responsibility in this situation should still be, well, I mean, Porter could probably get there, but the easiest rotation is an X out, probably. But I guess Porter doesn't communicate this. Credit to Devin Booker, who makes a great long throw, fading backwards to Bridges all the way in the corner, catches, hits a triple. It's just, I'm not saying that's necessarily his fault, but like communicate that. You want to be the number 2 on a team with the MVP. This is your time to show it. Step up your communication. 5:18 left in the third. It is Booker starts in the short corner. Ayton is sending a down screen for him. Aaron Gordon is hugging him tight to the point that Devin is sort of moving but looking at the baseline official saying, "Are you seeing this?" He curls off of Ayton. Gordon does a great job staying connected. What's going to happen is he's going to catch the ball just below the three-point line, and Bridges and Paul are going to split off of him. They handle this about as well as you can handle it without disconnecting from Devin Booker. Morris is now a step behind because he's trying to go underneath. Jokic does the right thing in stepping up to stunt and force Bridges further. Ayton rolls. Campazzo has to tag him as Chris Paul is relocating to the strong side corner. Bridges swings to Crowder. Crowder swings to Paul. Paul attacks Campazzo. Austin Rivers helps, or he stunts. One pass away. Jay Crowder makes an incredibly tough shot. So in that situation, it's not anybody's fault. I threw it in the middle there to illustrate that even if you do everything right, the Suns can still make you pay. Feels like, again, I mean, That's coach of the year stuff to me, but that doesn't matter. So if we jump a little bit forward, it's a double drag for Campazzo. Aaron Gordon is the first screener. Jay Crowder has Aaron Gordon, and Bridges has Campazzo. They switch that first one, and Jokic bumps Crowder, but he fights to stay connected to Campazzo. Ayton drops, Campazzo kicks out. Jokic catches the ball, ready to go. Pump, Crowder leaves his feet. Drive, sidestep in the lane. Crowder is behind him. Bridges is jumping with his crazy wingspan. Ayton is jumping. Arm is extended. Jokic does not make it. And it's tough because I think Jay Crowder does push him. He gets up as he's sprinting back on defense and looks at the official for a second. Not enough to deter his running. It's not a Luka situation. Chris Paul brings the ball down. He swings it to Bridges. Bridges Euros in the lane, throws a wild pass to Ayton. Campazzo and Rivers look like they're going the other way because Campazzo tips it up in the air. Ayton swings to Booker. Booker scrambles, gets bumped, steps through, and is able to throw a wild pass to Bridges. Jokic is now on Bridges. The problem here is that nobody is accounting for Ayton, who dives to the rim. Jokic has to foul, or maybe he doesn't have to foul, but he fouls anyway, and one. So that's the difference between the two centers in a nutshell. Is Jokic is having to do everything. And the guy he's guarding just gets to waltz to the rim because there's so much chaos, and the two stars allow for Ayton to just do whatever. If Ayton is your third best player, you're really good. If Jokic has to be defending, sorry, that's not fair. If Ayton is allowed to be a key to your offense and is the third or fourth option, and Jay Crowder is the fifth option here. He's just going to gun no matter what. It's Jay Crowder. Bridges, to me, is the third option. If Jokic has to work that hard and Ayton just gets to waltz to the rim like that, that puts you in an impossible position. Last play, and this is a little bit earlier when Denver still has the lead, 9 minutes left. It's something I forgot to talk about, but I wanted to highlight just the position the Suns put you in. Okay, so Aaron Gordon has Devin Booker on the left wing. Ayton is stepping up to set a screen. Jokic steps up to the level. What happens is Devin Booker is going to take a wide angle and he's going to open up. So if you've seen enough Devin Booker, which at this point you should have, if you don't, shameless plug, I have a video from the bubble. He normally likes to load up in that wide right to left crossover so he can use that screen. He doesn't. Hang, dribble, attack. Now he has a step. Jokic is all the way over to where the end of the announcer's table is, just about. Booker drives. Campazzo is at the elbow already because Chris Paul is at the 45. Michael Porter Jr. is your last line. He is a few steps above the restricted area. Devin Booker drives right at him and makes a quick pass as soon as he's about to hit Michael Porter Jr. to Jay Crowder in the corner. Campazzo does the right thing. He rotates over to take that pass away. Crowder, quick touch pass to Chris Paul at the wing. Catch, and he's wide open here. Chris Paul is going to miss this, and it is bad storytelling on my part to not have done this earlier, but this was a sign of things to come, is the rotations are going to get blown. Whose fault is it? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But somebody gets open, and that's what the Suns do. Like I talked about with the Nets, they put you in these super tough positions. And unlike the Nets, who do everything seemingly perfectly, or at least did in the first two games, the Suns were made to scramble by the Nuggets. But when you have Chris Paul, Devin Booker, they can just attack in a straight line and force you to rotate and then swing, or target the low man on those corner threes, as I haven't read the piece yet because we're recording this in the afternoon, but Jackson Frank, who I'm a fan, I believe a friend of yours, hopefully friend of the pod, he wrote about corner threes, and I'm excited to read that piece. But yeah, I mean, if you watch the game, you could kind of see that stuff happening. The way they attack you is just, it's relentless.
I couldn't say whether CP3 is healthy or not. It seems silly to speculate because I don't know anything. And I don't have any intel in the Suns organization. I didn't play soccer with like Robert Sarver's kid growing up or anything like that, so I don't know. But as far as what he's been able to punish teams for, some of the things he previously wasn't able to do, and I would think due to his, shoulder against the Lakers, he's been able to capitalize on now against the Nuggets. Does that mean he's all the way back? No. Does that mean it was one game where he kind of pushed through it? Maybe. But if he's fully healthy, the Suns are coming out of the West. You danced around the term perfection earlier. This is a team that is like a Galapagos turtle. Was allowed to just kind of, in its own environment, stew and become this ageless, wonderful thing that's so hard to destroy. Its shell is so you just can't penetrate it. Impenetrable. And as far as offense, that's where the analogy for a turtle ends completely. Is some other animal, I'm sure. I won't be the one to do it, but they're an impressive team. I have nothing to say other than I can't wait to watch more and gather more intel and see how they continue to attempt to outfox the NBA because they've been damn good at it so far.
That's the problem with the Suns, is they continue to ask you questions you don't yet have answers for. How do you contain Devin Booker? I don't know. Is it doubling him? He passes out of those. He picks those apart. Are you trying to go at him defensively? Aaron Gordon did that. The Nuggets made a conscious effort to post Aaron Gordon and put Booker in those spots. Guess what? Devin Booker, as we've talked about many a time, he embraces the physicality. He wants that contact. An anti-Michael Porter Jr., if you will. Feisty, scrappy, he will get after you. And if you go at him, yeah, he's going to get tired, but he doesn't ever seem to run out of gas. Hashtag analysis. But Bridges is able to attack a shifted defense. He's able to make you pay with this three-point shooting. Does it come and go? Yes. You know what doesn't come and go? His willingness to take those shots. Jay Crowder, for all the flack that people give him about he's going to shoot you out of games, well, he's unafraid of the moment. Maybe he's too eager for the moment, but he wants it. He's not going to stop shooting. And those are the guys. Two fish with gun winners in this series. Campazzo Cam Payne, who we haven't talked about yet. Cam was really good in this last game. He attacked the gaps that he was given. And if there is no fall, well, that's not fair because Cam Payne is no Chris Paul. But if there's minimal fall off in moments from Cam Payne to Chris Paul, there's nothing you can do because Devin Booker will buoy all of your lineups. He didn't go off for 47 points on 15 of 22 shooting, 11 rebounds, et cetera, like he did to close out the Lakers. It was 21, 8 of 12, 8 assists. Yeah, 5 turnovers, but that's a byproduct of him trying to make stuff happen. Manipulation with his eyes, making the defenses shift. Stuff I've talked about before. You'd rather your young star be able to take the lumps on defense, pass out of aggressive doubles, be able to make plays, hit that and one and he's lying down on the logo like he did in the bubble against the Clippers. Like, that's all such cool, energizing stuff. Devin Booker will back down from no one. And Chris Paul, same thing. And that's why Jay Crowder too. And that's why the Suns are the way that they are. I use this word a lot this episode, but relentless.
One might even say you've been relentless with your use of the term. I thought his answer was so awesome when they asked, in that video, you said you didn't want to be doubled. Now you've dealt with the double so well. And his answer was so funny. He's like, I know how to deal with the double. Like, you pass out quickly, you make the read. He's like, I don't have to do that in the summer. I want to work on stuff. So, yeah, that's a different thing anyway. I knew how to do it tonight. I was happy I could do it. And same with KD too. They ask such funny questions. And last year it was even worse in the bubble. I can't remember who it was. I can't remember the sideline reporter, and maybe it's better that I don't name her. But she asked Jamal Murray if he used the latest police brutality tragedy to fuel his performance. And it's just like, if you're in these positions, I hope you give more thought to your stuff, and I hope you don't start every question with talk about. The field needs to do better. And yeah, that's my mini gripe. But especially, man, athletes are so gracious for the most part. They're just like, what? Okay, yeah, sure. And they answered in that format, and that's good. But okay, that feels like we've done 2 of the second round series, yeah? And I would say quite in depth.
Yes.
Okay, so that feels like a very good spot to end things. I hope you're looking forward to episode number 2. I hope you enjoyed this one thoroughly. I think we did a lot of in-depth stuff. I think it was probably worth your time. If you're watching this, if you're interested in basketball to this level, I'm going to confidently step forward and say it was definitely worth your time. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. If you want to like, subscribe, or leave a review somewhere, this is for the podcast feed. Do your thing, man. Go nuts. Unless it's not 5 stars, then you can just keep it to yourself. But thanks for listening anyway. But thanks for tuning in. It's been an absolute pleasure. Evin, thank you for always so graciously hosting and allowing me to add my little tidbits of knowledge to your giant gold mine of knowledge, and allowing me to tag along for this experience. You're always so gracious with it.
No, I refuse. Bye.
See ya.
Drop it off. Let me see if your booty's soft. Gold mouth. Hold up, hold up. Yes, I'm from the dirty south. Lights out. Straight up. Summertime, I brought the ice out. Pipes out. All my shooters came from Moscow.
And listener, we'll see you post haste. And I'm also wearing these shoes, the Hair 7s, because the other Space Jam is coming out soon. So that's fun, you know? Big shout out to Bugs Bunny, Big Chungus.